Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are, my friends. My name's Alex, and here I'm going to be teaching you Firebase Part 4. We're going to get right into it. First, we've got to make sure we have our Firebase pulled up so we can check our data, and then we're going to be going to the canvas. Now, I've left off exactly where we were in Part 3, and now we're going to make the final adjustments we need to query users' names and post their usernames and scores to our game. So to do that, we're going to need to add a few more variables and some objects to our game. So we're going to start with the variables. We're going to go to the scene properties, and we're going to go into our Firebase structure. Inside of that Firebase structure, we want to create a new variable, and that variable we need to call status. Status is going to be a text. We're going to delete the number in there. And then we're going to create another one. And this one is going to be fetched data. Now that we have that, we're going to set that to a structure. It's very important we set this to a structure. We hit apply. And now we need two objects. We need a text that is for leaderboards and a text that is for scores. So what we're going to do is add a new object. We're going to go to text. I'm going to change this text to 64. We're going to name it username, or names, username. There we go. We're going to leave the font, and we're going to change this to user name. I'm going to go ahead and bold it and outline it. For the color, I want to do white for this example. Hello, let's go to white, please. There we go. Let's click it down here. And then we'll go to black for this one. We're going to up this to 4. And we're going to hit OK. So now when we drag in our username, we can see it nice, big, and bold up there. I'm going to do this 3 times, just so we have 3 different usernames that we can query from. And then we're going to go back into our object, go to variables. Inside of the variable, we're going to create a new one. This is going to be a number variable, and it's just going to be called ID. Hit OK. And now we can see here in the instances, each one of them has their own ID. We need to count from 0. So the first one's 0, the second one is 1, and the third one is 2. That's because in programming, we always count from 0. 0 is a number. Now we can just simply duplicate the username, call it score, and then we can drag our score over here. Now it says username because we duplicated it, so we can change this to score and hit OK. Now, this is for people who want to use the leaderboard system in a way that allows them to create their own little layouts and have the scores however they want, or displayed however they want. So we're going to go ahead and pull this down, and we're going to follow what we did before and name the IDs so that they're matching for each of them. A little bit out of center here. You're just going to have to forgive me on that one. This is just for demonstration purposes. You just enable your grid and move these around wherever you want. And then at the end of the video, I'll be adding a little section in for how to extrapolate all this information into just a single text. And for that one, we're going to go ahead and create another duplicate of the username, and we're just going to name this full leaderboard. We're going to put that one over here. And we're going to change this to just list. Now that we're all squared away so that we can see our usernames, we're going to navigate over to our scene events. And from here, we're going to get started with a new event group. So what we need to do is create a new event group by creating an event, add an event group. We're going to move that action underneath. And we're going to call this one leaderboard, or actually we're going to do database query and posting. So now we want to call at the beginning of the game scene. So I'm just going to copy it from up above. We're going to copy the at the beginning of the game scene, and then we're going to run our database information. And so basically what we're going to end up structuring is this element where every time we launch the game, it checks the database, and if there's changes to the database, we're going to update our database. So all you have to do here is follow along, and I'll show you where everything is. We're going to start with our first action. We're going to go to Other Actions, scroll down to Firebase. Then we're going to click on Cloud Firestore Database. And now here we can kind of see all of the options we have for that setting. Now, And in this episode, we're going to pretty much exclusively be using queries. So we're going to click on queries, and in queries, we have 3 types of queries. We can run a query, we can filter a query, and then we can create a query. And they're kind of self-explanatory, but we're going to go with create a query, and we need to start by starting a query. Now, queries can be named whatever you want, but in this case, we're going to be querying the leaderboard. And in the collection area, we need to type what the actual collection is called from our database. So going to our database, we know that the collection is also called leaderboard. And the way that this is read is collection, document, field. Again, that's the collection is leaderboard. The document in this case is the user's names. And then the field is the score and username section. And now inside of our collection area, we're going to type leaderboard. And it's really important that we make sure that we get our capitals right, just as exactly as they are from our database. So we're querying using a query called leaderboard, and then we're going to be targeting the collection. So we're going to hit OK. Now we need a new action, and this is to order the actual query to begin. We go to other actions again, go to Firebase, go down to the Firestore database, queries. We're going to order our query. So we've created a query, which is going to ping the leaderboard, and then we're going to order that query. So we're going to go to field of order, and now we're going to order the leaderboard. And the field that we're going to be ordering these by are the usernames. And we're going to, in this case, it needs to be username because that's the field we're pulling from. And then we need to change the direction to descending. Now, if this looks like a quotes, you need to put this inside of it. But if you rather, you just click on select a value and then select whether you want descending or ascending. Descending is top down, ascending is bottom up. And we want the top of our leaderboard. Then we're going to limit the number of these that we pull. Now, in this particular case, you may only want to be pulling the scores, and from the score, because we're already querying the database, you can pull either the username or the score. But in this case, we want to make sure that when we pull them, we're ordering them in the fashion that we like. So now what we need to do is limit the returns that we're getting, and to do that, we're going to go to Actions, Other Actions, Leaderboard Database, go down into the cloud storage, queries, filters, and then limit the amount of documents returned. And so the query name, again, is leaderboards. And then the amount to limit by, we're going to do the top 3. And then we're going to be running a query. Go back down to leaderboard Firebase, cloud, queries, and then finally we can run our query. Now we're going to be running continuously, which is a watch query. Now, what a watch query does is effectively every time you load in to your Gdevelop game, it's going to be checking for any changes to this document that we're pulling, anything to the database change. And so to do that, we're going to go to query name. We're going to push through. We're going to call back the variable to load, and we're going to put it into the Firebase fetched data. And this is going to use all the data that's in there and shove it into this area. And then we're going to send a callback message of either OK or error, assuming that this goes through. Now, there's a lot of cool things we can do with this message later on, but that's why I had you create the Firebase.status. We're going to hit OK. And now what happens is it's going to pull the information to our database and load it in. Now we could see that if we go to preview with debugger. Now nothing's going to update yet, but we hit refresh, go to our scene variables, and as we scroll down to our database, we're now going to see that there's a docs array that moves into a structure that keeps all of our information neat and tidy. So now what we can do is navigate back to here. We're going to create a new we're going to create a new variable. So Shift D. We're going to now be checking to make sure that that database didn't error out. And so we're going to go to variable. We're going to be checking that Firebase status variable, and we're going to be making sure that it returns OK. Make sure that it's lowercase. And now, assuming that this returns true, and that's the only way that we can do this, we then need to clear this symbol. We need to clear the variable. And so to do that, we're going to go into our variable again. So type var, go back into the status, and we're going to blank it out. Effectively, this creates a trigger once while true, because as we read through Gdevelop, if OK is true, the second that this returns true, we're going to change its name. And so that means that it's going to read this block one time in one frame, and the next time it reads it, it'll actually be blank, so it can't run more than once. There's a few ways that you can manage this, but this really is the streamlined sort of way. This makes sure that every frame that it reads until it returns true, it gives you an opportunity to make sure that you're actually getting the information. Because of the way that frames work in Gdevelop, if you dropped a frame or something and you only had a trigger once, there's a possibility where it might not go through. So we want to make sure that it's continuously running until it goes through and then it turns itself off. And then what we want to do is change the text of our username, and all of them we're going to do this to. We're going to go ahead and clear them out. We're going to do the same thing for the score. And that just guarantees that if there's nothing there, or once we return, we're going to blank it out, and then we're going to load the information in. So we need a child element now. We're going to create two event groups, and this is where you get to decide what you want to do. In your leaderboard, if you want to just create one giant list that you can read from, no problem. We'll do that in this one. So we'll say from list, and we're going to duplicate this, and this one is for each name ID. It's pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is condition, go to our username, and we're going to type username and then variable. Get our variable, and we're going to check ID. And the first ID we need to check is the position of 0. We're going to copy and paste that and change username to score. Now we have our ID 0 for username and ID 0 for score. And if that is true, we're going to tab down just to organize it. We're going to check to make sure that the username isn't blank, that there wasn't an error in the database, essentially, or it doesn't return 0. So we're going to check the condition, and here we're going to test the scene variable that we created. So go to variable, go back down to fetched data, and this is where things get interesting. We're going to be fetching the data as a text, and we're going to make sure that this doesn't equal, and we're going to pass through 0 here. This is to make sure that it doesn't pass through the text string into that field as 0. As usernames being input, we're already sending it as a text to the database. So we need to return it as a text. So we're going to say if the Firebase.fetchData isn't 0, but there's a lot more that we need to add to this variable. We need to make sure, and you can click on it here. You could go back into it if you wanted to and edit it from here. But I want to show you that you have to then go into that database structure that we saw in the preview of our template. And going back to the debugger, we now know that the Firebase structure data for the fetched, we can see that it breaks it down into the docs file. So we need to call that area. And to do that, we go back to fetch data, we type docs, and then in the doc, because it's an array, we have to pass through the ID of the leaderboard that it's attached to. So in this case, username and score are both 0, so we'll pass through 0. Then we need to target the specific data and the field that we want to target, and that in this case is username. And just like that, we have a check to see whether or not that data in the username is equal to 0. And here we'll go back to the debugger. We'll see fetch data, docs. Here we see value, and so that we know it's an array because it starts with 0. And then the next one would be 1, 2, and so on. And then we see that 0 breaks into a structure type. So here we see the doc is an array. The structure type is in data. And then we go to the score or the username. You can ignore value because we're saying that this equals this basically. So value of data and then the value of the number. It's just letting you know that you're going down into, it's letting you know the input types. So here we have the data, and that's the type structure. Then it has no value because the value is actually the children in it. And so we have score, username, and we can see the score is 0, and I am Alex is the first one. So we can go ahead and close down our preview. Now that our preview is closed, we're going to go back to our game scene. We're going to enable our ability to clear our local database. We're going to go ahead and start by clearing it. Now that it's clear, we need to get rid of that so we don't accidentally delete the username after we start again. We're going to type a new username, Alex. I'll press enter. And if I hit the S button, it's automatically saved to the database and pulled in real time because we're running that query all the time. Even though it's only running at the beginning of the game scene, that query is now running in the background. And anytime that there's been a database change, it's just listening to watch that list, and it takes up very little resources. If I could show you this one more time, we're going to go back in here. We need to make sure that we disable this, delete our name, close this down, disable. We'll call this I am Alex, hit enter, and then S to save. And now we see that it's pulling the username list. So we're going to close this down, open this up, and make sure that we enable number 2 to pull the top 3 usernames. And we probably want ours to actually be ascending. So we're going to go into here and swap that around, hit update. We should see the usernames propagate. Now, if you want to do it all into one list, it's actually very straightforward. We can just disable this. We can open this list. We're going to be using something you might not have seen before. Click over here on the conditions, add the condition, and then we're going to be adding a for each child variable of the structure or an array. Delete that other task that we had there. And now we're going to be calling the Firebase dot fetched data, and then we need to also call the docs, which is something that'll be uploaded in time here. So once we have the doc set, we can store the child into a new area. So we're extrapolating from one thing, and then we're going to create it into like a text list. And then, so to do that, there's a couple of ways we can do it, but one of the easier ways is to create a new area in the Firebase. So we're going to go back to our properties, and then we're going to create a new structure inside of our database, assuming I click on the right one. There we go. And we're going to just call this one Leaderboard. Make sure we do that with a big L. And now we're going to process that into the child of, in this case, it's Firebase, and then Leaderboard. And then we need to store that into just some random integer for now, or something, or some variable to pull it from, and we'll just do I for now. And we'll need to then create our action. And all this needs is one singular action to do. We're going to go to Leaderboard and change its text. And we're going to add to this. We're going to pass through the Firebase dot leaderboard, and then we're going to be doing dot data, and make sure that's lowercase. And we're going to do the username field. Now, after the username, we want to include a additional text field. We're going to make sure there's a space between these two things. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to do a semicolon and then a space. And then we're going to make sure that's closed out, do another addition sign. We're going to do Firebase again and back into Leaderboard. And then data. and then score. And then for each of them, we're at the very end, we need to do plus, and we need to do something that adds in a indentation, or in this case, a new line, and it's new line, and wrap that up in a function, and hit OK. So now if we do preview, we should see that the list is created next to Alex. Now it's a little over to the side, so we're going to pull it over here in our game scene. And then we're actually going to move it over here. And the reason that list is showing up is because we never clear that value out. So we're going to clear it out now, and then we're going to take a look at it, and we can see that the scores are being printed. If you really want to, you could even do them both. So let's run this, and we can see that our database is functioning on both ends. And that's it. So hopefully you found this useful. Do stick around for part 5, which is coming here pretty soon, so don't miss out on that. And in that section, we're going to be adding the last little polish that we need to make sure that our scores and our usernames are being added at the end of a gameplay cycle, so we can submit those scores to the database without having to press the S key. If you have any more suggestions or things you want to learn about Firebase, please post them in the comment section below. Remember, happy game making, and I'll see you in the next video.